Today, we're digging into a recent AP News piece that caught our eye.
Oh, yeah. Which one?
It's titled, Trade War and Leery Travelers Have Airlines Trimming Flights and Withdrawing Financial Guidance.
Ah, right. That one definitely stood out. A lot going on there.
Exactly. So our goal today is to unpack what these moves by the big U.S. airlines really mean, look at the why behind them.
And maybe what it signals about the bigger economic picture.
Precisely. So we've got this AP News article as our main source.
Sounds good. It provides a pretty solid look at these shifts in the airline world.
And for you listening, the mission here is to get a clear handle on what the airlines are doing, the reasons, maybe links to trade stuff, consumer feelings, and what it might mean for all of us, without getting totally lost in the weeds.
Yeah, cutting through the noise to see what's actually happening. Let's do it.
Okay, so that headline alone, trimming flights, withdrawing financial guidance. American Airlines, for instance, pulled its 2025 guidance entirely.
Yeah, that's a big step. Financial guidance, for anyone who doesn't follow this closely, is basically the company saying, here's how well we expect to do money-wise.
Right, so pulling it, that seems, well, significant, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It shouts uncertainty, basically. They're saying, look, things are too unpredictable right now for us to confidently forecast that far out.
And it wasn't just American.
No, not at all. The article mentions Southwest and Delta made similar moves. They're all pointing fingers at an uncertain economic outlook. That's the common thread.
Makes sense. Hard to predict your earnings if you don't know what the economy is going to do.
Exactly. It suggests they're having real trouble seeing clearly in the next year or so.
And the article gets specific about Americans saying they saw a considerable drop, especially in domestic leisure travel, starting around February.
Right, after what sounded like a strong Q4 and a decent start in January.
So what happens in February? Why the sudden change, you think?
Well, that timing is interesting. A sudden dip in leisure. That's often people cutting back on non-essentials when they start feeling a bit nervous about money or the economy.
Yeah, discretionary spending. Travel's often one of the first things to get squeezed.
It really is. So that February marker could be important, maybe tied to specific news or just a growing sense of unease around then.
Then there's Southwest. They're not just talking forecasts. They're actually cutting flights for the second half of the year.
Yeah, trimming the schedule. That's a direct reaction to seeing fewer bookings, lower demand.
And like American, they couldn't reaffirm their earnings outlook for 25 and 26 either.
Which tells you they don't see this as just a quick blip. Cutting flights and pulling back guidance suggests a more sustained worry about demand.
United did something kind of interesting, two forecasts. One with a recession, one without.
Yeah, that really paints a picture of the uncertainty, doesn't it? Planning for both possibilities.
It does. And they're also cutting domestic flights, about 4% from July, specifically citing weaker demand for economy fares.
Economy fares. That lines up with the American story about leisure travelers, right?
It seems to. Suggests maybe the more budget-conscious flyers are the ones pulling back first.
Could be. And putting that recession scenario out there, that's pretty blunt. Shows how seriously they're considering a downturn.
Even Delta, who apparently started the year pretty optimistic.
Yeah, expecting their best year ever, I think the article said.
Right. Even they've backed off their 2025 expectations and paused plans to add more flights.
That's quite a turnaround. From best year ever to hitting the brakes on expansion.
So what does that signal when even the optimistic ones get cautious?
It suggests the headwinds they're seeing, maybe the economic uncertainty, are stronger or more widespread than they initially thought. It's a shift to a much more defensive stance.
And it wasn't just the giants, right? Frontier and Alaska's parent companies also pulled their 2025 guidance.
Exactly. Budget carriers, major carriers.
Yeah.
It seems to be hitting across the board.
So it's not just one airline's problem or one type of traveler. It feels systemic within the industry right now.
That's a good way to put it. It points to a broader concern about the travel market's health overall, given the economic climate.
Okay, so let's talk reasons. We touched on weakening sales, especially economy leisure. American CEO Robert Isom specifically said February.
Yeah, that February timing again. What was going on then? Lots of talk about inflation, maybe interest rates, the general economic direction.
Global stuff, too, probably. Trade tensions were simmering.
Definitely. It makes you wonder how much those big headlines start to influence individual wallets. Maybe people started thinking twice about booking that summer vacation back then.
United CEO Scott Kirby was pretty direct. He said there's a reasonable chance things can weaken from here.
That's too stark. But airline bosses often have a front row seat to economic shifts, don't they? Travel bookings react fast.
Yeah, it's a leading indicator sometimes. And Delta's CEO, Ed Bastian, he explicitly linked the slowdown to broad economic uncertainty around global trade.
Okay, so now we're really connecting the airline's problems to the wider economy and trade issues.
How tight is that connection usually? Airlines and global trade.
Oh, it's fundamental. Trade drives business travel, obviously,
Yeah.
but also international relations, economic confidence tied to trade. That all impacts tourism, both people coming here and Americans going abroad.
So trade spats aren't just about, like, tariffs on goods. They can actually make people not want to fly.
They can, absolutely. Disruptions, uncertainty, it ripples through.
And this is where the article brings in that poll,
Yeah.
showing people are actually scared of a U.S. recession.
Right, and worried that President Trump's tariffs mean things will cost more.
So it's not just abstract economic indicators, it's people's actual fears potentially stopping them from booking flights.
That seems to be the connection the article is making. Macro worries, recession, tariffs, prices hitting micro decisions like, should we take that trip? Discretionary spending takes a hit.
The piece also quotes Michael Feroli from J.P. Morgan.
Yeah, the chief U.S. economist there, what did he add?
He suggested something interesting. Maybe some anti-American sentiment linked to trade policies could be partly why fewer international visitors are coming. Said it was down about 5% year over year.
Wow, 5%, that's noticeable.
Ah,
So the idea is that trade policies aren't just economic, they affect perceptions, and that can literally deter tourists.
seems to be his point. He mentioned news stories about tourists canceling trips to the U.S. in protest.
That's a fascinating kind of unintended consequence, isn't it? Trade policy impacting tourism flow because of sentiment.
And it's not just a feeling. He's pointing to a drop in actual visitor numbers.
Yeah, data backing it up. It really shows how tangled global politics, economics, and something like travel can get.
The article also flags those big tariff announcements by President Trump back on April 2nd.
Right, which caused market jitters and definitely ramped up recession talk.
Could that April announcement explain the February leisure travel drop-off Americans saw? Is there a lag?
It's possible. Maybe the anticipation of tariffs, the ongoing trade tensions throughout early in the year, started building that uncertainty even before the April announcement. These things often don't happen overnight. Consumer confidence can erode gradually.
And the trade war itself. It didn't exactly cool down, did it? Some taxes put on hold, but tariffs against China went up, and Beijing hit back hard.
Yeah, increasing its import tax on U.S. goods to, 125%?
Ouch. So it was escalating.
Definitely. And that kind of back and forth just fuels more uncertainty for businesses, for consumers,
Yeah.
makes everyone hesitant to spend or invest, travel included.
Plus, China apparently denied they were even actively negotiating to end the trade war, despite what Trump claimed.
Right, that kind of conflicting message just adds to the confusion and anxiety. Businesses and consumers crave predictability, and they weren't getting it.
Beyond airlines and trade, the article points to other warning signs, too. Slowing sales of existing homes in March.
The housing market often cools when the economy does.
And U.S. consumer sentiment dropping in April for the fourth month straight.
Okay, so multiple signals flashing yellow maybe. Housing, consumer confidence. It paints a picture of growing economic caution.
It does feel like these things are lining up.
They often do. These are key indicators economists watch closely, and they seem to be reinforcing the airline's cautious stance.
But it wasn't all bad news in the article.
Oh, what were the bright spots?
Well, American Airlines execs apparently said business travel was still solid,
Okay, that's interesting.
and sales for premium seats on long international flights were also holding up.
Premium seats. So a difference between the front of the plane and the back.
Seems like it. Why would that be? Why would leisure economy drop off but business premiums stay strong?
Well, business travel is often less optional. Deals still need doing. And premium international travelers. Perhaps they're less sensitive to immediate economic jitters. Maybe their finances are more insulated.
So the economic pinch isn't being felt evenly across all types of travelers yet.
That could be what it suggests. A more nuanced picture than just travel is down. Different segments are reacting differently.
And the other potentially positive point, despite all the recession talk and falling confidence, the article notes we haven't seen widespread layoffs.
That is crucial. Fear and caution are one thing, but mass job losses are usually a sign things are getting really serious.
Maybe businesses are holding back on cuts, hoping things improve, or the slowdown isn't deep enough yet.
Could be either, or both. But the job market holding relatively firm, for now, is definitely a counterpoint to some of the more pessimistic signals. Something to watch closely.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. Summarize the key takeaways from this deep dive into the AP News piece.
Right, so big U.S. airlines, definitely getting cautious. They're cutting flights, pulling back those financial forecasts.
Mostly because they're seeing weaker demand, especially from domestic leisure travelers and economy class, and just a lot of general economic uncertainty swirling around.
Yeah, and that uncertainty seems tied, at least partly, to fears about a potential recession, concerns about trade policies, tariffs. That whole picture. It's affecting how people feel and plan travel, both here and internationally.
But it's not a completely bleak picture.
No, exactly. Business travel seems okay, premium international's holding up, and critically, the job market hasn't collapsed. So it's mixed signals, really.
The airline industry is definitely giving us some early clues about economic shifts and how people are reacting, though.
For sure. It's often on the front lines when consumer behavior starts to change.
Which leads us to that final thought for you, the listener. If the airlines are seeing these shifts, what other industries might follow suit? Where else might we expect to see similar adjustments?
That's a great question. Think about other big-ticket discretionary spending cars, maybe. Home renovations, high-end retail.
And what does all this tell us about how connected everything is? Global trade talks impacting whether someone in, say, Ohio books a trip to Florida.
Right. Or how consumer confidence, shaped by news headlines, influences billion-dollar decisions by airlines. It really highlights that interconnectedness.
So what questions does this raise for you about where the travel industry is headed or the economy overall? Definitely gives us a lot to chew on as we watch how things unfold.